Hello everyone, my name's Tim. I am the Silver Coder. Today's video we are going into the world of database applications and how to connect and present let's say a simple user interface. I will say this is not an advanced video, but it will just give you an idea of what's needed to have a Lazarus program connect to a database. In this particular instance, we are also going to be using an SQL Lite database because it is it's an easy database to use, and so on. So, and if you did want to, and it also does actually work quite happily on mobiles and etc. So, and is fast. So, it's just in this particular case, it's just as good. But a lot of the components that will be used here will work with other databases as well. So here what we're doing is, like I said, I work as a volunteer for a let's say a charity service, and when they changed from, let's say, change to the new web forum layout, one of the things which the new one lacked, shall we say, was a page where I could see which posts I had responded to. So what we're doing today is writing a little tiny application where I can store which ones I am replying to, and so that I can then, let's say, time I can add a bit of functionality here into click on a record, say, and it will take me to the web page so I can see whether it's been updated or not, etc. Obviously, I'll need to have logged in beforehand somewhere, so that's the plan anyway. So, like I said, in this particular application, what we have here is the main window. Sorry, not the main window, the main application, the main window, and then we also have a data module. Now, the data module then is for components which I might want to share between different applications. So, for example, I may, want to, if I had, say, a desktop version and a web version of the program, then they could both use this data module here. Or if I had, let's say, a service and a desktop application, then again, they could, share this data module and any code that lives on the data module. And so what I have here then is a connection, which in this case here it's an SQLite 3 connection. I then have a transaction. I also have a query, and one can argue about whether or not the data source should go onto a form or inside the data module is beyond the scope for this particular video. So, but in this instance here, I do have it on the data module. So what we're looking here at really is that the SQLite connection represents the connection to the database, and it is through, let's say, transaction and queries that the records within the database get updated. The data source then represents the link between, let's say, user interface elements and data or information that is stored within the database. You can have then also what we have here, like I said, is a transaction where we can either everything works or everything doesn't work at a transactional level. So, and we'll see how this gets used. So, let's say you can start a transaction, do some SQL statements. If they succeed, you can commit them. If one of them fails, then you could do like a rollback, and let's say nothing happens. It goes back to the state it was when the transaction started. So then on the connection component, then the only setting which was configured, shall we say, is the database name, and this will be the database that gets created by the program if it doesn't already exist. When you then go over to the transaction, shall we say, this property here is the database, and we are telling it, what database will this transaction be working on. Similarly, for the query also has a database as well. What database is this query going to be performing its queries against, whether they're insert, update, etc. And like I said, the data source then is the bridge, shall we say, between the query and the UI elements. And like I said, these are all contained within the data module. So we're looking at things which are non-visual. Code-wise, in this particular unit then, is all we have really is this one function. And what it does is it will check whether or not our database exists, and if it doesn't exist, the database is created, and some indexes are then added, followed by a commit line which basically says it's good, go ahead and keep going, keep doing it. So I won't basically be going into the syntax or the grammar of the particular database, because whether you're using Access or SQLite or SQL Server or Oracle, whatever, the syntax of the statements can change. Now, because we are talking about in this particular case, we're talking about an application to store, let's say, information about a post or a reply in a forum that I've, made reference to. What we want to do basically is to, in my case, is to have an ID field, which is just going to be the primary key, the time when the first post was made. The last modified time will be the time when I replied to it last. The username will be the name of the user who made that original post that I'm replying to. The title of the post statement, maybe something like, I don't know, let's say if it was Pascal, the argument for an if-then, type statement. And the URI will be the HTTP address of the post that I could click on to, go to. So now we jump, and that is seriously the entire code that exists in this data module here. Actually, what I should point out to you is that from an SQL or a configuration type function, the SQL parameter here is, if it will open up for me, it will basically be saying, just give me all the records from the data table. And you can though have separate statements for a record insert, a delete if you wanted to. In this particular case here, I have not set any of that up. Also, in the options here, what I have turned on or enabled is auto apply. Let me make that a bit wider so we can see it all, shall we? I have turned on the auto apply updates, auto commit, and the keep open on commit flags, shall we say, and you'll understand why these are on when you see the application running. So with all of that said and done, let me go over to the main form. So in our main form, what we basically have here is a database grid, the navigator, and then I've got 5 fields here. Unfortunately, you can't see what's on the labels, but suffice to say, they do map to the fields which are in the database, like the title, the modified date, and so on. And these, now when you look at the fields here though, these particular fields are database aware controls. Let's say in a much larger application, I may name the field, to represent or to be closer to the field in the database that it's looking at. But in this particular case, I have not. So, given that this particular field here that we're looking at is a username, I might, I would logically call this something here like, edit username or something, similar to that. Now, because these are data aware controls, to make them data aware, what we need to do is to link. Let me just get one of these fields here selected. What we need to do is to tell the control the data source that it's using and what field this control maps to. So in this particular case here, they're all going to be pointing at the data source, and if the query were running, I would select it from a drop down, but I can also just type the name in and it will keep, understand that value and save it. So in this particular case here, I've got this field here is mapped to the title field. This one here is mapped to the username and to the URI field, etc. Some code here so that we can look at some of these functions individually so you know what's going to happen. So in this instance here, when the user clicks on the create button, it will go into this function here, and essentially that's going to create the database. So let us run the let's build the program and then we can run it. Okay, so here we are. The program is now running, and when we click on the create button, the database gets created, and we can see it here. So we can close that down, that window, and you'll notice here that at the moment the grid is still empty and the navigator, still looks like it's not doing much. But now when we run the query or open the query, if it's a select statement, we will open it, as opposed to something like an insert, which doesn't really return any result set. You'd execute that one. That when we open the query now, we can see the contents of the table, because it essentially was doing just a select star, and also now you can see the navigator controls light up a bit. So also you will note here that I have not done anything let's say fancy, like setting the created or last modified date to the current date. So this is the absolute minimal type application. So if we wanted to, let's say, insert a row into the database, the top part here becomes our form that we're using for adding and editing. And when I click on the plus sign, now you can also see the post and the cancel buttons become enabled, or they now have a bit of color to them. And we could say this would be the information from the, let's say, the forum in which I am getting my data. So let's suppose now we were looking at a Pascal forum, so it might be something like if then needed, and the user would be, let's say it was me, Tim. The URI would be something like HTTP, blah. And I'm just going to change the dates here, 2024, and it's in the future, but hey, that is what it is. And we'll make that the same. Also note, by the way, because these are, this is a DB edit, or date edit I should say, data aware control, you also have a drop down as you saw before. So for a control like this, it's not bad that you've got to get a lot of functionality, without having to do much yourself yet. So because I am very well aware that when you are writing a database application, the user interface is just a very small part of that. When you take into account, let's say, business logic reports and everything else that goes along with that. So we filled out our record now, and we hit the plus sign, and now you can see the well, it's a bit hard, you can't see it all. There we go. The URI, the title, the user, etc. Now, obviously, if we were, let's say I could, let's say set the width of the columns in the database, if not in database, within the grid itself, so it's not so large. But what we'll do is we're just going to add another row in here, and we'll just put this one. Hang on. Let's go plus, and we'll just go here AA, and let's do here. Let's go through to today, and we'll double click on that one, and let's copy that value there down into here, and we'll now post that one. And now you can see that when we changed rows, now the contents of the fields get updated, depending upon which row we are in. And that is one of the features of being able to use database aware controls. It automatically takes care of that work for you. So if I were in this row here, and it was actually, let's say, Fred who updated the record, I can now hit the plus sign and it gets updated. You'll also note, by the way, that when the row was, after the row was inserted into the database, the grid was, you saw the new row added, it didn't. Normally what you'd see, let's say if you're using a component to represent let's say an insert statement or a query, how are you going to refresh that grid? And sometimes you have to reopen the query for that to work. Here, this was accomplished whoops, I'm just closing the program down, but this was accomplished through these properties here about keeping the query open on commit, and the automatic applying of updates and committing of the row. If we now run this program another time, so we are now just waiting for the our database to appear. Click the open, and you can see the records that were there previously. So you can see now how a database application can be, shall we say, created rather simply through the use of database aware controls, a connection, and query strings. That is the, let's say, start of a database application, and you can see how little code was needed to get it to work to this stage here. Other controls, by the way, you can use things like, let's have a look here. I'm trying to find, let's go over to the form, and let's go over here to components, and we want to look for database aware components here. So you've got things like so we're using the navigator here, as I said, a DB text and a DB grid. So here are some other things you could be using. You could have like a list box to have a list of images, a lookup combo box. So let's suppose now we were to have two tables and you're looking at, let's say, a lookup table containing department names perhaps, and you want to just store the primary key. That's where a lookup combo box would be used. You can have check boxes and radio buttons, etc. So most if not all of the standard controls, you would have, which are, let's say, non-databasey, that you put on a form, there would be a DB aware version of them. Keep in mind also that when to find these particular controls, when I'm looking at the components, I'm actually using the find function to filter down on the ones which have DB in the name. So that makes it easy for me to find the controls that I want to use within a program that uses database aware controls. So to summarize this particular video, if you're going to be using, it's always, even if you're having only, let's say, a single form, it's always a good practice to put the, let's say, the non-visual components into a data module, so that if you're going to share them, if you want to share them, then you can. And in here, what we've got here is the connection and a query and the transaction. The data source again could be on the, a case could be made for it going onto the main form. On the form then, what we then have to do is to include or use that data module. Once that data module is included or is used by the main form, you can then go and select the database, or the data source I should say, which all the controls use. And then don't forget about the data field. And once you've So thanks for watching. If this video helped you, make sure to subscribe for more Object Pascal, Lazarus, Free Pascal, Delphi updates. Hit that like button as well, and you can share this video with others who you think might benefit or help. So you can also hit that bell notification so you'll never miss out on future updates from myself. So let's keep that conversation going into the comments. I'd love to hear what you think or what you would like to learn. So bye for now, until next time.